Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. My name is Richard Hawkins. I work for an organization called ICRA, which is based in the Netherlands. And we are part of a pan-European organization called Agrinatura, which together with the FAO implemented this CIDICE project, which we are going to talk about this afternoon. The occasion is really that we are launching the final and perhaps the main report of this project. The report was published this week. It's about what we call a transversal analysis, which is to say it's a review of the experience we had in all of the countries during the project CIDICE, Capacity Building for Agricultural Innovation Systems, what we achieved in those countries and what we learned from this whole CIDICE project experience, which lasted from 2015 until 2019. So this year we have been pulling all the loose threads together and trying to reflect about what it all meant, what we achieved. So this afternoon we are going to present to you these lessons learned, what we have learned from the project. We're going to split it up this afternoon sessions into 3 parts. In the first part, we are going to have a few words from the Vice-President of Agrinatura, Tim Chancellor from the Natural Resources Institute in the UK, and also from Selvaraju Ramasamy, who is the Chief of the Research and Extension Unit of the Office for Innovation in FAO. So FAO, the Office of Innovation, or Office for Innovation, sorry, is hosting the TAP Secretariat. So first I will then pass you over to Tim Chancellor, who will introduce, say a few words about what is Agrinatura and how we came about this project before we talk with Selvaraju. Then after that, we'll have 2 more parts to this afternoon. One part in which we will present the main findings of the project, what we achieved in the 8 countries. And then in the third part of the afternoon, we will have some reflections from some of the countries where this project was implemented in terms of where we go next before a final summing up. So if I may now hand you over to Tim Chancellor, who will say a few words on behalf of Agrinatura.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, I mean, it's a real pleasure to join this webinar and to provide a little background on Agrinatura and the context for our involvement in developing capacities for agricultural innovation systems. So Agrinatura is an association of 35 universities and research institutes in 16 countries in Europe. Our members share a common interest in contributing to agricultural development in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. And we work in partnership mode globally, but with a particular focus on Africa, where we collaborate closely with the Regional Universities Forum for Capacity Strengthening in Agriculture, RUForum, and research networks such as the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, FARA, and others. We're involved in a variety of initiatives. We work with universities and university networks to help strengthen their capacities in different areas, notably in equipping students with a wide range of skills that they need for the workplace. And in the research and development arena, we have a strong link with the European Commission's Development Cooperation Directorate, DevCo, and we're currently engaged in initiatives on value chain analysis and nutritional information systems, amongst others. Our interest in strengthening capacities for innovation actually goes back quite a long way and has deep roots. As innovation systems thinking started to develop, it became increasingly apparent that new approaches were needed to assist the different actors to contribute effectively to innovation processes. And in 2011, Agrinatura was asked by the European Initiative on Agricultural Research for Development, EARD, to conduct a review of capacity strengthening for ARD initiatives carried out by European countries. A key conclusion of that review was that future capacity strengthening efforts should focus on multi-stakeholder and open innovation partnerships, and also operate at the organizational and institutional, as well as the individual levels. And similar conclusions were emerging from capacity strengthening initiatives such as the SCADA and PAPARD projects that some of you may be familiar with. At the same time, as the Tropical Agriculture Platform was establishing, it conducted a regional needs assessment of capacity support for agricultural innovation. And so this really revealed the need to target efforts more effectively and to coordinate interventions more closely. Agrinatura and FAO were actually discussing collaboration at that time, and we signed a memorandum of understanding, and capacity development for enhanced innovation was really seen as a top priority for our collaboration. And this really was the sort of driver for the valuable partnership that developed and the emergence of this CDACE project, in which the common framework and the was developed and the evaluation activities took place under the CDACE project. As Richard said, the project ended. Actually, it ended in December last year. And so there's been a time, well, there's been an opportunity now for a period of reflection on the outcomes, including the report that is a subject of the discussion today. And as this is hot off the press, it's really very timely. And I hope that we'll all look forward to having the opportunity to hear about the main lessons and the implications for future actions. And we look forward to listening to feedback and related experiences from participants who might have their own experiences to share. So with that, I'll hand back to you, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Just one point. I think, Manuel, if I'm not mistaken, we're going to make available the link to the published report so that at the end of the afternoon, people can download the report, I hope. I think that will be made available in the chat. Having said that, I think I'll now pass over to you, if I may. Selvaraju, you may say a few words on behalf of the FAO and TAP Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Participants, distinguished presenters, on behalf of the Secretariat of the Tropical Agriculture Platform, I welcome all of you to this important side event of the TAP Partners Assembly. FAO hosts the Secretariat of the Tropical Agriculture Platform, a G20 supported facilitation mechanism comprising of 46 global, regional, and national partners representing agriculture research, education, and extension, and the international technical and development agencies. To address the challenges facing agriculture, the partners of the Tropical Agriculture Platform have adopted agricultural innovation system approach that moves away from the idea of a technology development in isolation and linear transfer of these technologies without necessary participation of various actors, including the farmers. As we are aware, the agricultural innovation systems as an approach comprises of many different actors. The four main components includes agriculture research and education, business and enterprises, bridging institutions, and enabling environment. All these actors have to be organized in such a way that they provide efficient support to the needs of the farmers. The approach of agricultural innovation system promotes co-creation of knowledge, technology, and practices with participation of all these actors, including agriculture producers. The approach also provides an opportunity to learn from each other and apply appropriate technologies and practices depending on the local context and also the problems to be addressed. All the actors of AIS, agricultural innovation systems, have equal and significant role to play to develop knowledge and innovation that are relevant, appropriate, and accessible to all the stakeholders in the continuum. In such a multi-stakeholder innovation platforms, capacity development is critical to promote the interaction. In this context, Tropical Agriculture Platform focuses on the development of national capacities for agricultural innovation in developing countries. For contributing to the core objective of the TAP, FAO partnered with Agrinatura, as it was already highlighted by Tim, through the European Union funded capacity development for agricultural innovation systems project implemented between 2015 and 2019. The lessons learned from the project implemented in 8 countries, and the publication, as it was mentioned by Richard, will be available at the end of this event, contributed to prioritize the activities of the TAP, especially to revisit the TAP common framework that probably you may all aware, or most of the key components of the TAP common framework will also be covered during this event. Building on the lessons learned from the CDAS project, since 2019, FAO has been implementing a follow-up project on developing capacities in agricultural innovation systems, scaling up of the Tropical Agricultural Innovation Platform framework. That's a common framework for capacity development for agricultural innovation systems, which focuses on 9 countries: Burkina Faso, Cambodia, Colombia, Eritrea, the Lao PDR, Malawi, Pakistan, Rwanda, and Senegal. The initiative is supported again from EU's BICIRA initiative. The main aim of this work is to assess the agricultural innovation systems that allow identification of weaknesses, gaps, interventions required, and key areas for interventions to strengthen the agricultural innovation systems. The outputs and outcomes of this project is expected to contribute to development of country profiles of the national agricultural innovation system. The results of the assessment can also be used to prioritize and guide the investments to revitalize the agri-food system at the country level. We are looking forward to continuing the collaboration with all TAP partners, including Agrinatura, to meet the objectives of the TAP. With these remarks, I welcome once again all the participants and presenters to this important side event of the TAP Partners Assembly and request your active participation. I thank you very much for your attention. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Selvaraju. Well, with that introduction, I think we move to the second part of the afternoon, which is the presentation of the main findings of the transversal analysis. In this, well, it's here, we call it session 1, I'm calling it part 2. It's the first of 2 sessions with PowerPoint slides, in fact, when we discuss the successes and challenges for scaling capacities to innovate. So there will be 4 speakers. I will briefly introduce the project. Then my colleagues Aurélie from CIRAD and now with FAO will talk about what we did and what some of the main findings. My colleague Renaud, who was with us in ICRA for a while, who was leading the effort to implement the monitoring, evaluation and learning component of the project, will look at some of the successes and challenges of the project. And then finally, Manuela from FAO will report more on some of the the deeper and policy lessons which I learned at the national level. So if we may go on to the next slide, please. Let me just say that the project brought together people from these 3 basic institutional directions, if you want to put it like that. First, we had people who were working for the Agrinatura, the 5 Agrinatura institutes in Europe, which were mainly implementing the project. That's to say NRI, AIS from Portugal, CIRAD from France, IAX from Italy, ICRA from the Netherlands, who represented Agrinatura. We also have people from FAO who were in each country and also from FAO headquarters in Rome. And the third party which was represented in the project here are the people from the national programs in the 8 pilot countries. The 8 pilot countries were the 2 countries in, well, I'll come to that in a moment, I think is probably the easiest. Next, please. So the SEDAIS project, to say a little bit more of the background of this, as has been mentioned, was a support to the global partnership for capacity development for agricultural innovation systems, which is the TAP, the Tropical Agricultural Platform. The first major activity of the SEDICE project was to develop a so-called common framework on capacity development for AIS. So this was a review of all the work which had been done in other countries in the past to look at some of the concepts. As we see here, the 3 documents were produced. One was the conceptual background, one was the sort of implementation, and the third one was a sort of synthesis putting all this together. So the common framework was developed during the first year of the project, and then the rest of the project was to test and document the use of the TAP common framework in these 8 pilot countries. And the 8 pilot countries, as I was about to mention a minute ago, were Honduras and Guatemala in Central America, Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Angola in Africa, and then Bangladesh and Laos in Asia. So the 8 pilot countries where we were testing out this common framework. And to some extent, of course, we had to put the meat on this skeleton as we went along. So we were developing it, but also refining it as we went along. And we were trying to ensure that what we were testing was comparable between the 8 countries. So this was quite a challenge in trying to bring, trying to keep a sort of fairly uniform approach going in 8 very different countries. But the fact that these 8 countries were all very different is what makes the analysis of this so interesting. Next, please. The second, there are 3 main things which were new in the SEDICE approach, I would say. The first of these is that the project focused very much on functional capacities at all levels. That's to say at individual level, organizational level, and the level of the enabling environment or the institutional level. And these 4 functional capacities, which we focused on to begin with, which came out of the overall common framework review and analysis, which identified these 4 functional capacities. And they were the capacity to navigate complexity, how to put things into some sort of context. The second was the capacity for collaboration between the different stakeholders involved. The third was the joint capacity, reflection and learning by those stakeholders. And the fourth was the capacity to engage in rather broader strategic and political processes. And together, these 4 capacities were considered to jointly make the capacity to adapt and respond in order to realize the potential of innovation. We will see later in the presentation how these focusing on these functional capacities worked in practice. But just for the moment to say that this was the emphasis of the project, was to focus on the functional capacities rather than what might be called technical capacities, how to grow things or how to plant things, and also agribusiness capacities, how to sell things. We were focusing very much on the functional capacities as what we thought was important to enable the other 2 types of capacity to be used. Next. The second aspect, which was new in SEDICE, in the sense of also a fundamental part of what we considered to be the underlying principles of capacity development for innovation, was that we were implementing a so-called dual pathway approach. And this was at 2 levels, what we called niche and system level. And by the niche level, we really mean something like innovation partnership. That's to say at local level. You may be looking at, let's say, a system for producing and marketing avocados in Guatemala, for example. Or you may be looking at a system for producing and distributing farmer seed in Ethiopia, in certain region of Ethiopia. These are what we call niches. They're quite focused in terms of the partnership and the ambitions of that partnership. And the second level is what we call the system level. Now, the system level is to some extent the sort of the national level which exists, or it's a broader picture. All of these niches exist in a broader scheme of innovation in each of the countries where we're working with. So it was, this was the original concept of the two levels at which we wanted to work. And at each of these levels, the niche level and the system level, they both involve individuals and organizations and the so-called enabling environment. So it's quite a complex concept of the different entry points and different levels at which we wanted to have an impact on this project. Next. And the third aspect, which I would say is new to SEDICE, or at least it's different than most traditional capacity development projects, which are often more conventional training type projects. The third aspect, which we saw as different and fundamental to the so-called SEDICE approach, was this focusing on developing an iterative process of coaching and policy dialogue. So at each innovation partnership or niche level, we had a series of different interventions, activities to plan to do something differently, then the implementation of that, and then the reflection. What happened? What did we learn? How do we move forward? And then after reflection, to plan a next cycle of events. So then you plan another round of interventions, you implement those interventions, you reflect upon that, and then on the basis of that, then again, you go back to planning for a third cycle, etc. So during the 4 years of the project, we basically had time to implement about 2 to 3 cycles of intervention at the different partnerships that we were involved in. I mentioned that we were in 8 countries, and in each country we had about 4 niches. So we were working in about 32 niches across, or innovation partnerships across the 8 countries and at the 8 national policy levels, if you like. So they were the 3 main parts of what we were trying to do something different, as I recap. One was we focused on the functional capacities. The second was we focused on not just the innovation partnerships themselves, but also the broader context at national level. And the third aspect was this iterative way of going about, of intervening. So intervening in terms of, we had some short workshops on specific ideas and concepts, etc. And then we also had workshops to reflect on what we learned and how we wanted to move forward. So they were the 3 main aspects which I would say were new. So I think with that, next, I will probably hand over to my colleagues, Aurélie from FAO and CIRAD, who will talk about how the functional capacities worked or didn't work to make joint innovation. Manuela, I think, are you coming second? We'll talk about the importance of facilitated and evidence-based policy dialogues. And then Renaud will sum up and talk about the successes and challenges for strengthening agricultural innovation systems through project-based approaches. So I think I hand over to you now, Aurélie. Is that right? And next, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. So good evening, everybody. We begin now with the presentation of the functional capacities that were developed across the 34 niches of the CDS project in the 8 countries. So my name is Aurélie Toillier. I'm a scientist in innovation management hosted at FAO. Please, next. I am going first to expose you briefly some key points on how we tracked and measured functional capacity development during CDS project, what we learned at the level of innovation niche partnerships as regard to functional capacities, and how it's made innovation work in practice. And the third point, I will underline some other enabling functional capacities at upper levels, at the level of innovation support service providers and policy makers. This is really kind of a snapshot of some results, and you will be able to find more details and findings into the reports that we will share at the end of this event. Next, please. So first of all, here, this is the way we developed a real-time mail approach, monitoring, evaluation, and learning in order to track, assess, and refine capacity needs and capacity development during project implementation. So since capacities are kind of moving targets, we defined progress markers on a participatory basis with innovation actors, and we assessed them with these actors in the midterm and at the end of the project. We analyzed the contribution of these new capacities gained by niche actors to the innovation trajectories, so as to understand how innovation actors moved from a phase to another, from ideation, experimentation, adaptation, to scaling up of their innovation. Also, this reflexive process of assessing capacities and progresses enabled actors to refine and improve joint activities for greater achievements. Next, please. So, so as you understood, we had a great diversity of types of innovations and innovation niche partnerships that we supported for 3 years across 8 countries. So here is an example of this diversity. Some niches were opportunity focused, such as a network of innovative entrepreneur, food processing micro entrepreneurs in Burkina Faso. Others were more solution focused, as for the use of new digital technologies for extension services, or for the development of a new national label for organic agriculture. And some niches were more problem focused, such as the cultivation and processing of sunflower, which was a process led by an industrial with its business associates. So all these innovation niche partnerships were composed of individuals belonging to very different types of organizations: NGOs, farmers organizations, service providers, private firms, extension workers, and sometimes also researchers. All these actors were linked with formal or informal arrangements. And those partnerships also, some were fully new, created by the project, and others were kind of active innovation networks since a few years, and the project came to give a kind of a boost to accelerate their work, their collective work. So facing this diversity, we had to support communities with very heterogeneous level of collaborative capacities, and also that were at different stages of the innovation processes. Some partnerships were really at the really beginning, trying to identify a new solution to test, and other partnerships were more at the scaling phase, trying to reach institutional actors or policymakers to spread the innovation in the country. So next slide, please. So despite this diversity, we identified 5 common functional capacities that were developed across all the niches, and that enabled them to accelerate their innovation projects. These 5 capacities are listed on the axis on the left side of this slide. So we had the capacity to engage into collaborative activities, which were a key enabling capacity for developing the other following activities. We developed the capacity to deliver and evaluate technical results. We developed as well the capacity to develop and manage an innovation agenda, the capacity to forge new partnerships, and the capacity to influence their institutional and policy environments. So all of them are functional capacities, but are very specific types of capacities that enabled niche partnerships to move from an innovation phase to another. So on the x-axis of the graph, you can see the phases of the innovation process. And the diagram shows you an example of a pathway of achievements in a niche, starting from a T0 problem identification to T7, maybe after several months or years, when the niche actors managed to scale their innovation. We found out from the mail data analysis across the niches that some capacities were really needed to reach a phase and overcome some bottlenecks in order to move from a phase to another. Some of the niches that we supported got stuck in a phase of experimentation since years, and CDS projects enabled them through a kind of managerial boost with a coaching approach to gain capacities to better to revise their innovation agenda, to better outline new partnerships that were needed for success, and also to redefine which type of joint activities they could achieve together and move to the scaling up phase. So next slide, please. This process took a lot of time, especially to go beyond the engagement phase where trust, motivation, knowledge, and empowerment were needed among niche actors. So they gained this through the coaching process. And in the second year of the project, niche actors understood the benefits from increased functional capacities, and they engaged actively in collaborative innovation activities. And one major outcome was that they were able to specify further technical support that they actually needed to move faster along the innovation trajectory. So for instance, in Burkina Faso, in the women-led micro-entrepreneurship niche, the women realized that instead of asking technical trainings on how to process cereals, what they mostly needed was to discuss and to negotiate with farmers so that they grow high quality varieties appreciated by consumers and easy to process. So at the end, they requested technical trainings for farmers to help them gaining insight into new crop varieties and contractual modalities with food processors. And thanks to these trainings dedicated for farmers, women entrepreneurships overcame major bottlenecks in their processes for grain transformation and reached the scaling up phase. Next slide, please. So in a nutshell, CDS project contributed to develop other types of functional capacities at the upper levels, at the level of organizations who provide innovation support services to niche actors, and also other types of functional capacities at the level of policymakers. For instance, at the level of organizations, we developed capacities to organize, capacities to deliver on-demand support services in a timely manner, and capacities to relate and coordinate with other innovation support service providers in order to increase their efficiency along an innovation trajectory. So the existence, accessibility, and responsiveness of these providers, and even coordination among them, was key to the capacity for scaling innovations, and in fact to scale the coaching process at the country level, and then to ensure kind of sustainability of the work done by CDS projects. So this is one of the key findings of the project that need to be included in the TAP Common Framework. Functional capacities need to be developed at 3 levels for strengthening a national AIS in a triple pathway approach at the micro level of niches, meso level of organizations who provide support services, and at the macro level of policymakers, targeting very specific functional capacities which are not the same for all this at all these levels. So now I will give the floor to Manuela, who will give you insight into this macro level of policymakers and the functional capacities that we developed at this level. Thank you. Over to you, Manuela.
All right. Thank you, Aurélie. Good afternoon to all participants and panelists. My name is Manuela Bucciarelli, and I'm working for FAO in the Research and Extension Unit. As mentioned by Aurélie, my presentation will focus on the importance of facilitated policy dialogues for strengthening national agriculture innovation systems. Next slide, please. Okay, let me first give you a bit of background regarding policy dialogue. So the policy dialogue in the CDICE project was mainly supported by FAO in the 8 countries, and it was a reflective process that involved people from different interest groups who were discussing an issue in which they had a mutual interest. It was organized at niche level, but it also culminated with a roundtable with national policy actors. The main objectives of the CIDAIS policy dialogues were to reach a common understanding of the importance of innovation and the role of policy development in promoting agriculture innovation, to strengthen the capacity of all stakeholders involved in the innovation niche to influence strategic and political processes, and to recommend improvements in the institutional mechanism and enabling environment that promote innovation in agriculture. So the main results that we can attribute to this policy dialogue process was the fact that this showed the value of such mechanisms that are able to link the niche to the district and the national level. They were also effective at bringing issues that were blocking at niche level to the higher level where they could be addressed and tackled. And also a good learning point was this was not a single event, but an ongoing process. Next slide, please. Yes, so in this graph, we show how the policy dialogue built on the evidence from the assessment and the niche experience, and how CIDAIS supported learning loops from one level to the other. In fact, all the policy actors were able to take stock of gaps in the AIS and in the innovation agenda. And also the AIS actors engaged in this process changed their perception of innovation processes, and they gain insight into new ways of supporting innovation. Also, transformative learning cycle took place, supported by the involvement of several categories of AIS actors in the niche activities. And there was also mobilization of some key individuals from key organizations in several capacity development activities at the three levels, at the niche, innovation service providers, and policy. Also, the CIDAIS project enabled learning on how to identify and support innovation niches, and in some cases changed the regulatory framework to create enabling environment. So the policy actors that were targeted through this process were mainly coordination bodies, policymakers, AIS, innovation support service providers, government executives, and innovation facilitators. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the functional capacities that were developed at system level, or yes, the system level capacities, were mainly the ones showed in this slide. So the capacity to assess a situation, to create a vision and a mandate, the capacity to organize and deliver while being responsive to the niche needs, the capacity to coordinate innovation service, support service providers, the capacity to lead, engage, and bring and create bridges between AIS stakeholders, the capacity to formulate comprehensive and inclusive and responsive innovation policies. So the strengthening of these capacities at system level led to some primary and expanded impacts, such as new regulatory frameworks were developed in some of the 8 countries, new policy instruments. In general, innovation support services become more responsive, and we also had an increased production income and competitiveness, and also scaling up of new solutions. Next slide. So some conclusion, some key messages. So the capacity of innovation support service provider was key to the capacity of scaling up and out innovations at national level. We can say the policy dialogue around very concrete niche issues or experience enabled then further innovation and improvement in the general environment for innovation. Through the policy dialogue, all the innovation niche actor could better understand the policy context and also the pros and cons of the formulation and implementation of policies affecting innovation. And also the actors became more aware of the role they can play and what exactly they can do to achieve better results. In general, we also noticed that there was more sense of responsibility and accountability by the policy actors, which also optimized the use of resources and efforts, and so also improving the performance and competitiveness of the niches. So that's it very shortly, and thank you very much for your attention. And I guess over to you, Renaud, for the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manuela. Good afternoon, everybody. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so we're going to talk about the challenges and successes of this project approach in reinforcing the agricultural innovation systems. As we all know, the main key challenges of development or capacity building projects are, on the one hand, the ownership of the process by the people that take part in it, and then the sustainability of the transformation, which is actually generated by the project. So we'll look into how CIDAIS has, at least in part, managed to achieve to address these two challenges. And we'll look briefly at the question of the sustainability and how such a project-based approach should be carried forward by either new projects or people in the country or the countries themselves. So in the first place, we'll look here at this called ex post. We'll call it an ex post pathway, which is a little bit what CIDAIS managed to achieve. So we can see we achieved two natures of outcomes, primary outcomes and expanded outcomes, and we achieved primary and expanded impacts that hopefully will lead to systemic impacts, probably on the longer term, which is far beyond the time frame of the project. Looking at the primary and expanded outcomes, these are outcomes that are reached by or achieved by actors at the three levels of strategic involvement or development that we've mentioned before, the micro, the meso, and the macro level. So the niche actors, the people that are actually bringing their innovation or having their innovation project, the organization, the solution and service providers, and the policy actors. So the first type of outcomes is a capacity which is typically derived from these functional capacities, which is a collective and individual transformative learning. People come and they learn together. The second nature of outcome, which are the expanded outcomes, are already, I would say, a little bit more structured because they bear on organizational learning and changes. The important element is that, as you can see, there were feedback loops between all these steps, and these feedback loops are completely related to the cycles we've seen in the previous slides by my two colleagues, that we were working in cycles, and then these cycles allowed to actually loop back and look at how the change had been promoted or brought forward, and then fine-tune the CD activities. In some of the countries and some of the niches, but I would say more at the level of the countries, we've seen some primary and expanded impacts, which bear more on the delivering of innovation support services and policies and the delivering of innovation. The difference between the outcomes, whether primary or expanded, and these primary and expanded impacts is that to have impacts, the three levels have to be aligned. They have to work together. They have to move together to generate these impacts. So we've seen in CIDAIS, some countries have already started to delivering new or better support services and policies, and some of the innovations have started to be scaled out. then this will move on, hopefully in the future, towards a more performant agricultural innovation system on the one hand, and a more sustainable agricultural system on the other hand. Next, please. So how did CDAIS actually do that? It combined factors that actually enabled these transformative effects. We can see here in the bubbles 3 complementary strategies, each of them with specific challenges, risks, and also a catalyst action. There is no single prescription. We've seen it in the making, in the implementation, these strategies came about, but not necessarily in a precise order. We would recommend to any implementer to blend these 3 strategies. Most important, and we'll come back to this in a little while, allow for demand to flow. There was a question in the chat box that I spotted, which was about whether the ideas of the farmers of were taken into consideration. The answer is clearly yes. The start from the niches had this bottom-up approach and this bottom-up factor within CDAIS, which was very important. And then the last element is to implement, and Aurélie already mentioned it, this MEL framework very early in the project, because it's a driver for stakeholders and implementers, and I'll come back to that. Next, please. Okay, so looking at this demand-led approach that we've called, by demand-led approach, we understand the design of on-demand support, while we mainstream, or the project mainstream, functional capacities and AIS thinking. This is meant by, I mean, what we mean by this is that the project implementers don't come with solutions. They're not the ones who know, but they are the ones that are providing solutions on a flexible way to actually answer the needs and motivations of the participants. So this demand-led approach seeks to ensure that the actual needs and motivations are expressed and they are considered of all participants, especially I would say the small ones that are less given the floor. It's meant also to nurture experimentation and transform failures in positive learning. And we've seen the learning cycles and the reflection. And this is the feedback mechanisms that we also want to ensure with this demand-led approach. We want the participants to be able to reflect on progress, to refine their needs, and therefore the project to adjust its interventions. Next, please. The other strategy that was combined with this first one, so it's not one or the other, it's both of them together, and the third one too. It's to actually embed the process. So by this embedded and participatory project architecture, we mean to allow diverse and heterogeneous AIS actors to interact constructively on the long term. The notion of embeddedness here is that actors are put at the center. It's not an expert-led project, or it's not a research-led project. It's a project which is led by the actors based on their needs and their aspiration. And then expertise, research, extension, support services come as support to these motivations. The embeddedness also makes sure that everybody has a say and is considered. And then a crucial aspect that we also noticed in the making, the implementation of CDAIS, is that it is very important to, on the one hand, promote champions. And by champions, we're talking of people that have sufficient weight and recognition by their peers so that they're listened to and they can weigh on the process. They can weigh on policymakers, they can weigh on actors, they can weigh on banks or investors, for instance. And on the other hand, there is a need, and this is very much part of the embeddedness of the project. There's a need to have very agile facilitators. We've mentioned it briefly, but the facilitators in CDAIS were absolutely crucial in having a leading or listening or engaging or encouraging attitude vis-a-vis the niches, and with connecting the niches to the other levels. We've seen the organizations, innovation service suppliers, and the policymakers. So agile facilitators that actually steer, manage, coach the niches. Next, please. So the third strategy, which is again cumulative with the others, is to have this multi-level and process-led approach. By this, we mean to promote a iterative action across all levels based on practical processes driven by actors. This is the process, the meaning of process-led. So we've seen it. The first multi-level element here is to have this micro, meso, and macro level. So use not the dual pathway that is in the TAF framework, but make that evolve to a triple pathway, because this middle element of the organizations that are actually linking the policymakers and the innovators is absolutely crucial in the fact that it establishes this linkage, and it provides services to the innovators while it also translates their needs to the policymakers. Having this approach also ensures that actors engage into the process of change and they drive it. They're made masters, I would say, or drivers of their process, and not passive elements of a process which would be driven by somebody else. So, and actors at the core and drivers of their change. And then having this multi-level also allows for all levels to cross-fertilize and inspire and pervade the system. We've seen, Manuela has shown it, that the policymakers were very much inspired by what they saw in the niches when they were allowed to be in contact with the niches, which they would not necessarily be. Okay, so combining all three levels that we've seen. Next, please. And then I would say, of course, but because the process is so complex and we're having these three strategies moving on at the same time, sometimes one starts and stops and they combine. There is this need for having this monitoring, evaluation, and learning framework, which is it's an underlying driver both for stakeholders and for implementers. And we've seen that this is thanks to this this MEL framework that we're able to analyze the outcomes of the project in general, as we're doing at the moment. So MEL is helpful at three levels. It provides a basis for analysis and knowledge, and the fact that it provides this robust framework to actually uncover and analyze ongoing and underlying processes is because we pause and reflect, for instance, that we discovered that, well, something has happened and we discover what happened and how it happened. It generates knowledge, and it generates a knowledge which is important because it's a shared knowledge between all actors. All actors reflect at the same time, and they come to the same conclusion, to shareable conclusions. So that builds up and reinforces the capacity development process. It's part of the awareness process that we mentioned earlier on. Then the second, I would say the second family of interesting impact or effects of the MEL framework is that it allows to have these structured pauses in the capacity development process to allow to measure achievements, looking backwards towards where we started and where we are now, allowed very much for participants, be they actors or be they facilitators or even the implementers, I would say ourselves, to understand what progress had been made and then how to actually adjust the process. So it's a very useful tool for the management. The third family is, I would say, of effects is observation and understanding. It allows to reinforce this process-led and demand-led factor of a project because it anchors it into reality. We're observing what is actually happening. And then, of course, it provides tools and methodologies, structured ones, to develop understanding and ownership. We developed references, guidelines for MEL. We trained a lot our own colleagues and the country teams. And I will stop here. A final recommendation about MEL is for it to be implemented from day one of any implementation projects, capacity development projects, because it allows to have these three combined effects throughout the project, and it allows to train people in the very early days. And with this, I thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Renaud. I think we've just heard quite a complex analysis of what happened in as I say, something like 30 or 34 different innovation partnerships. And so it may seem sometimes that the lessons learned are a little bit abstract. So for those people who want to go more into the nitty-gritty of what actually were the innovations in those 30 odd partnerships, I would encourage you to go to the report if you ever get the chance. We have, with time is passing on, as is the way of these events, we've already used up 1 hour of our hour and a half, which is allotted. And we intended to have a question and answer for 15 minutes. I will keep that to just 5 minutes because we still have some follow-up from some of the people who were most intimately involved in the countries. And so they can say a little bit more, give you perhaps a little bit more flavor about what it looks like from ground level rather than this helicopter view across 8 countries. I will just address some of the questions which were raised. Some of them are very targeted, and some of the questions are very general and not easy to answer. So I will just look at a few of them and then pass them over to some of my colleagues. But the first one I will answer is from Ikanath, if that's the right word, the right name, talking about COVID. We were very lucky in this project that COVID came along after the project had finished its implementation. So the question on how does COVID affect the activities at these different levels, we cannot say from the project that we're talking about this afternoon because it was completed by the time that COVID took place. I think undoubtedly there are likely to be some very important lessons learned about how to work in the COVID era in the new follow-on project of which is now being implemented by FAO. So I think later we could pass that question over to Selvaraju and or others from FAO. Excuse me. A second very targeted question, which I will direct to Manuela, is that there was some feedback from the Food Security Network in 2017, October and November, regarding the need to involve more private sector in, if I understood correctly, the question, in the TAP, that's to say in the global networks, because the private sector, of course, was very much involved in the different specific innovation partnerships, but I don't know about so much at the TAP level. So Manuela, can you say anything about that in terms of the involvement of private sector in TAP? Are you there, Manuela?
Yes. Thank you, Richard. And then maybe I could also ask my, Selvaraju to respond, representing TAP. I think this is an issue that TAP is aware of and has been addressed. In fact, is being part of the discussion. We will have meetings starting tomorrow of the 7th TAP Partner Assembly. And we are addressing this question, this issue of lack of presence of private sector in TAP. I'm not sure if the TAP chair, who is also here, and Selvaraju, the head of the Secretariat, would like to add anything on this regard.
Yeah, thank you, Manuela. Actually, this is one of the areas that we leave it to the decision of the TAP partners as well as the TAP steering committee and also other governing mechanisms. And this has been introduced as one of the agenda items to be discussed during this partners assembly. And I think we should be able to give you an answer how to engage the private sector and other different business enterprises as part of this work. But again, just I would like to stress this point because, we all have a different frameworks that facilitate this process, and the TAP cannot have a very common vision on this particular issue. So this is up to the partners to decide how they engage and how they, collaborate with the private sector and other business enterprises at the country level. So TAP, cannot give a comprehensive approach for this, but still it is open to the individual partners to decide according to their own institutional framework.
Okay, thank you, Selvaraju. I'll just take one look at two more questions and try and combine them in the sake of time. There was a question concerning the ideas of smallholders. Were they incorporated into the and how will this have an impact? How will their involvement in incorporating smallholders' views, I guess, in the policy process, how will that have an impact on terms of improving the suggested innovations? And another question, which is somehow related, was from Mark, Mark Redman, who said, did we implement this principle of questioning upsetting the status quo and even introducing conflict in application of the policy dialogue? So two very rather difficult questions to answer quickly, but I don't know if Manuela or perhaps Renaud would like to answer those questions in brief before we go on to the next presentation. You want to say anything? Manuela?
Yes, maybe quickly. I think the policy dialogue. It was as we mentioned, was not one event. It was a process, and especially the way it was structured. We had events at niche level in which we were able to identify policy-related problems that were affecting the niche directly, and how the innovation actor could perceive them, and then these policy gaps were then brought up to the national level. So having this kind of two-step approach helped a lot, and also strengthening the capacity of actors to engage in political and policy process, then enable them to broad these issues to the policymakers. And even if there were some conflicts, I think they were able to present them in a very constructive way. So I don't know if Renaud wants to add anything.
No, not really.
Okay, let us leave it there then. I mean, I think there are a number of more concrete examples. It's difficult to illustrate many of these answers without referring to concrete examples, which would take us a lot longer than we have available. So again, I refer people to the overall report, because I think there are some very interesting examples of some of these issues that smallholder farmers brought up in the policy dialogue and how they were resolved. So I encourage you to read the full report, or at least pick through it to look for those types of examples. There was one more question on in terms of how what sort of innovations are we doing to improve innovation extension services delivery, and I've purposefully not answered that one now because I think it can probably be best answered in our next session. Can we move to the next overall session, session 2, where we have 3 speakers. One is Rosanna, who was an innovation services provider and ex-CIDICE innovation facilitator, and who is now Chief Executive Officer of, in Bangladesh, of, let me remember the name. It's Ascend is the name of the organization. She's the Chief CEO of Ascend. Who will say something about the experiences in Bangladesh and what it means to her situation. Then Samson will say something about his experience with the project as a facilitator in Ethiopia and what implications that has for extension services. Because Samson is now with AFAS, the Africa Forum for Agricultural Advisory Services, so he can say something about that, which I hope will go some way towards answering the question from the previous session. And lastly, we'll have a presentation from Otto Muhinda, who will say a little bit about what the implications are at a more strategic level for the FAO program in Rwanda. So without more ado, maybe I can hand you over to Rosanna, and let's be mindful. We're supposed to finish in 20 minutes, guys. So,
thank you, Richard. Good afternoon, distinguished delegates of the TAP, Agrinatura members, FAO, and all other participants. I'm Rosanna Wahab. Richard has already introduced me, and I must mention that CIDES has given me a whole new perspective, and I must thank Claire Coote, NRI, and Agrinatura team for giving me the opportunity to work for this real transformational concept. I'm also thankful to FAO, the country representatives, NIFs, and CD experts from Bangladesh and different countries, because of whom I have been able to learn, experiment, and experience the CIDES concept. Bangladesh has a population of 164 million over 148,000 square kilometer area. We have GDP of $348 billion, and share of agriculture in GDP is 17%, and 48% of people are employed in agriculture. And the country has 12 ministries and national organizations directly and indirectly dealing with all types of issues related to agriculture. So the overall situation is very complex, and I'm here to talk about the challenges to develop innovation support services for agricultural sector in Bangladesh. We worked with 3 selected organizations for intensive data collection, research, capacity development, and in addition, we also had the opportunity to work with local level, national and private organizations and NGOs. So I'm going to add a perspective, bringing in all the experience I have of working with innovation support services. So next, please. So according to my observations, these organizations have 3-pronged challenges. These are challenges of the organization itself, the organization's services, and collaboration, the challenges of collaborating with others. So in the, the point where we are identifying challenges of the organization itself, the infrastructure and resources required to support ISS is not sufficient. Functional capacity needs to be developed. The lack of inclusivity and representation at all levels, and participatory leadership culture needs to be introduced in place of hierarchical culture in many occasions. Next, please. The challenges of the organization's services. So the organization's infrastructure and resources or strategy is not designed to accommodate innovation support services, and developing new product and new service for innovation is a challenge. Particularly this kind of innovation where different formation of niche and then supporting niche throughout its development is completely a new idea, which the organizations which we work with were not really thinking about. And then challenges of collaborating with others, and that is collaborating with other organization is often not seen as a possibility to reduce gap in delivery of innovation support services. So in many cases, we have seen that same organization is, please go to the next slide. So we can see that different organizations are dealing with the same products, same services, whereas if they collaborated, it could have actually made more sense. So for example, processed product. I have seen several organizations are working on the same issue. So, this is a real difficult situation, and the organizations need to talk about this, and duplication of functions is is a waste of resource in my view. And there's lack of horizontal and vertical networks. So we worked, well, there was a question on COVID, but one thing I can say is that we worked with Mango Niche and found the entire network from policy to farm level have worked in an amazing harmony to avoid disruption during COVID. And this is the story of success, CD's success. And in fact, the farmers called me just recently and thanked me. They said, because of CDs, all the awareness that has been raised, they have been able to take the benefit, and they have also created a network of mango farmers across the country. So I think this is amazing, and this is what I call transformational, because with this change, the farmers are actually seeing benefit, the policymakers are seeing benefit, and this is an occasion where, past CDs, the organizations have actually worked together. So in my view, scaling up to bring about a positive impact would require engaging relevant ministries and organizations, and people are keen to work on this, and they need opportunities to learn more. And next, please. Future of innovation support services in Bangladesh. Innovation support service will support more collaboration, inclusive participation, and bring dynamism. More action required at national level and organization level to deliver proactive innovation support service. And Bangladesh is keen to learn from practices in other countries. So all these things, and with the experience that we have learned at very small scale, I think, this is an amazing project. This has been an amazing project. And next, please. The next slide is about my future plan. Because of all that I have learned by working at CDAS, and my organization structure was not sufficient to deliver this kind of services. So I have actually established an Institute of Skills and Entrepreneurship to promote and deliver innovation support service at a broader range. And we are looking for opportunities to work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we move on now to Celsius. Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on wherever you are joining this webinar. I'm Samson Shatu, working as Capacity and Institutional Development Specialist for African Forum for Cultural Advisory Services. And also, I was working as a CDIS lead National Innovation Facilitator in Ethiopia. Sorry, because of a weak connection, please allow me to switch off my video, then I'll continue my presentation. Next slide. Okay, just to give you some overview of innovation support services in Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, we had 5 partnership niche, as explained by Richard. These were the chickpea, milk demand stimulation, feed safety, community-based seed multiplication and marketing, and the malt barley. So in order to provide support for this innovation niche, we have picked 3 organizations to provide innovation support services for the 5 niche as well as for other value chain actors. So these were representing from different institutions. The first was Ethiopian Institute of Agricultural Research, which represented the research system, and also the Ministry of Agriculture, Directorate of Agriculture Extension, which representing the extension services, and also Self-Help Africa, representing the private sector, representing the NGOs. So once we recruited these 3 organizations, in addition to recruiting this organization, national innovation facilitators were also recruited from the 3 institutions to sustain the project, and also an external facilitator to have a kind of a mutual learning. And also CDIS project organized different trainings, the different concepts, tools, and also methodological process of innovation support services. And based on this training, the 3 organizations, actors, as well as the innovation facilitators, they had prepared a kind of institutional analysis to know the existing status of the 3 organizations in terms of their capacity towards innovation support services. Then, based on the analysis, using the people, the different stakeholders, they prepared a kind of action plan, and based on action plan, they execute different interventions. And also there, as it was explained by Richard, the 3 institutions, they organized the learning cycles, what we call the reflection and the refinement. Then, and also these 3 institutions, they provided support for the 5 niches. Next slide, please. So what were the challenges we faced, especially in the process of implementing the innovation support services by the 3 organizations? So what we came across is the limited knowledge about innovation in general, and also the general innovation perspective by actors and also policy makers. So it's not an easy concept to understand the concept itself. And also, again, the other challenge is also it was very difficult to internalize the concept of generally agriculture innovation systems and also innovation support services by national innovation facilitators and also the partners or the actors who are involved in this process. And also, again, limited capacity to facilitate multi-stakeholders of the value chain by the national innovation facilitator, because mainly they were trained about the technical capacity rather than the functional capacity, which include the communication, which include facilitation, listening skill, negotiation, and so on. So the national innovation facilitators, they were very new, that they had to go through the training, through practical experience, through learning and so on, but eventually they managed to understand the concept and they were able to facilitate the different events and the learning. Then again, inadequate capacity of the innovation support service providers themselves, because using the organizational analysis, the gaps were identified, then the project were able to provide those trainings in order to fill the gaps. And also, again, the other challenge is also the needs from the partners. They were very diverse and among the different value chain actors. And some of the challenges or some of the demands were beyond the project's scope. Next slide, please. Again, especially in Ethiopian context, the project it was started very late, and again due to the financial limitation from the project, as well as limited commitment from actors, and that was again. It was very challenging, especially to continue some of the intervention based on the capacity gaps. Again, there was also a structural challenge in terms of providing the services by the service providers, especially
Samson, I think we've lost you. Can everybody else hear? I think we've lost you, Samson. Can we?
Yes, we lost it.
Yeah. Can we just focus on his last couple of slides? I think, or is that's the last one, or is there another slide? I think we just show. Just go back and show the last 2 slides of Samson. I think people can at least see them. So if you go to the last slide, which was the one where I believe that what Samson was going to say is that they are using these tools.
Sorry, I was dropped.
Ah, you're there.
I'm back, Richard. Sorry.
Okay, just give us a last slide or 2.
Last slide, okay. Especially the way forward. I mean, currently I'm working for AFAS. AFAS is working at the country level through the country fora, especially the EU funded under the DESIRA project. The CADEP XP4 project is being implemented by AFAS, FARA, and the sub-regional organizations. So what we are going to do, especially in AFAS, to continue the experience of the CDIS experience in the countries, we are focusing on, we have already conducted the capacity gaps assessment at the country level in the project countries. Then we'll be continuing promoting those tools and approaches in those different countries, especially we are encouraging the different learning events at the country level, and also promoting especially the new way of looking at the MEL system, which is outcome mapping, the progress markers, and the project plan. And also we are trying to document those experiences and scaling up to different countries. Thank you very much. Let me stop before I get drop off again. Sorry for that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Samson, and apologies to everybody for the drop off from Samson there. So over to Otto for the last part of the presentation. Otto, you need to unmute yourself. Yes.
Thank you. Now you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, I wish to greet everyone from Kigali, Rwanda, where I'm the assistant representative in charge of the program in the country office of FAO. So quickly, I have 3 slides. I want to go through the achievements of the CDIS project between 2013 and 2019, where we promoted the TAP approach and tools in Rwanda through awareness and functional capacities. We also organized in-country coping study among identified niches that identified needs and promote priorities for strengthening AIS. We also increased the capacity to facilitate agricultural innovation partnerships, especially through a group of national innovation facilitators that ended by being familiar with the TAP Common Framework approach, and also through 3 local innovation partnerships that were validated and validated the capacity development for AIS through value chain. 3 main value chain: the cassava, the dairy, and the watershed. Rwanda is very much now doing large-scale irrigation because of the consequences of the climate change. So the Ministry of Agriculture found that putting this AIS in the watershed areas, it was also innovative for the country. We also organized a marketplace here to build new alliances. There is other development partners that became interested to the CDIS approach, and we brought them together to build alliances. We also organized a policy dialogue that raised capacity to engage in the policy processes and identified constraints to innovations in the enabling environment. The Ministry of Agriculture is doing a lot of bringing innovations in the transformation of agriculture. So that policy dialogue was an opportunity for FAO to reflect on the TAP approach. Rwanda members of the initiatives participated to the global knowledge sharing event that was organized in Jamlu. That was very important for our key actors to cope and understand from other countries how the project was implemented. we had three main challenges. Although things went a bit well, but we had three main challenges. The interpretation of policies at a very local level is not straightforward for everyone. So we found that there is a need again to coordinate efforts of coordination with local authorities. Here, the country is full decentralized. So, you found that at the district level, there is a language that could be translated from the national level to the local level for innovations to be understood very well. We have in the country also a challenge of coordination and complementarity between research and extension. Actually, now the minister have created in between a kind of knowledge transfer unit between the research unit and the extension unit to make sure that whatever people are having at the research level, it could be translated in extension practices. So we have also identified that strengthening capacities to manage innovation processes, people want here things to pass through research before going to extension. So both at local, organizational, and national level, there are still a kind of oil to put in managing the innovation processes. At the end of the project, we identified three areas of unachieved businesses. For example, this organizational capacity development process came when the project was like 6 months at the end. So we take this, and this will be translated. We are negotiating with the European Union, actually, a new project that will be funded to support what was not very well finished by the AIS. And I think we will take this in the new project to be able to finish it. We found that also there was like 4 policy actions that were proposed that were not very much implemented. So this will also be taken into consideration in this new project under negotiation. The gender aspect, Rwanda is promoting the gender equality, gender aspect were not very much taken into consideration, especially in the subsector of livestock. Livestock is very important in Rwanda to promote agriculture development. So we think that gender, and they found out also that 60% of livestock activities are in hands of women. So this is something that we really think that we have not very much achieved very well, but it will have a way forward in the next phase that is negotiated by our office and in partnership with European Union and University of Rwanda. So I just stop there. Those were our achievements, challenges, and way forward. And I thank you everyone for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Otto, for all that final few comments. A number of questions have come in under the question and answer part function on Zoom here. I see many of them have been answered. There's a few that have not been answered. Unfortunately, we are quite late on in time now because time goes much more quickly than you expect in such as these webinars. I see that the link to the full report has now been cited on the chat box of this Zoom. So I would encourage everybody who has some questions about what happened in different countries and where, how the innovations were slanted and what affected the different parts. There is more information there. And if one wants to go, there are also individual reports for each country which are available. So if anybody wants to access one of those reports for the individual country or have problems accessing this overall synthesis report, please contact one of us to be able to to get hold of those reports. I would just say then to try and summarize, because I don't think we have time to go into a lot more questions. We've run out of our allotted time. I just would like to summarize by starting quick summary to say that it's a complex process, this what we were regarding as innovation. We started with a number of assumptions which have been tested and improved and commented on during this during what we've heard this afternoon. We learned a lot about what I would say is the innovation process. There were many successes. There were also some challenges. Some of those challenges were solved as we went along. Some of those challenges are outstanding. But I would say that from the way I look at it, much of what we have learned is extremely useful and is being taken forward in the new CIDICE project being implemented by FAO, and will be implemented, I think, in some of the projects that come under the new DESIRA program of the European Union. So the lessons are being taken forward. And I think also there is a lot of meat, which if I understand correctly, is being incorporated into modifications of the TAP common framework for future publications and future guidelines from the TAP. Maybe either Manuela or Selvaraju, you can correct me if I'm mistaken there, but I understand that there is work being done by the TAP expert group to improve this overall common framework. So keep tabs on that. If there are any outstanding questions which are burning with people and have not been able to answer this afternoon in the question and answer box of the Zoom below, please feel free to contact one of us following up from today. And I think with that, what I would like to do is perhaps hand over to Tim Chancellor just to say one or two final words, if that's okay. Are you there, Tim?
That's fine.
Thank you, Richard. I think you've already done an admirable job in summing up. Maybe just to emphasize that the CIDICE initiative was, although it was a significant project in terms of scope and scale, the resources were reasonably limited. It was essentially a pilot project, but it has generated, I think, a lot of useful information and evidence that can help us collectively to try to help mainstream some of these approaches and processes that were described in the project. So although there will be other follow-up projects that we've heard that FAO are currently implementing, perhaps Agrinatura involved in one as well, these are really designed to try and catalyze processes at the national level in the countries to try to help mainstream these approaches. So I think collectively with the support and coordination of TAP and the network of people, including the 100 and so people who were involved in the discussion today, which is very encouraging to see, I think we're in a good place. I think I would also highlight the importance of the monitoring, evaluation, learning framework that was developed in the project and MEL in general to facilitate learning, track progress, and also to look at impacts. I think it's a general difficulty with capacity development interventions to actually track impact for various reasons. But I think with the sorts of approaches that are being tested here, I think that provides some good pointers for the future. And sometimes we have impacts that are not necessarily picked up. I think Rosanna's presentation was interesting in that respect. I think it was really quite encouraging. Good luck with your new institute, Rosanna, and let's hope that we'll continue to interact with you on that. In terms of the changes to the common framework that Richard mentioned, I think that's something that the TAP group are best placed to answer. But just to mention that I think, the issues that arose during the project, looking at perhaps a triple pathway as opposed to a dual pathway, maybe reviewing some of the functional capacities that were outlined in the original framework. Perhaps there are some additional capacities that are needed at different stages of the capacity strengthening process. So I think there's quite a lot of work to do, but I think that the outcomes that we've heard are really very encouraging. And let's look forward to continuing work together in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I don't know if there are any final words from any of my co-panelists or co-organizers of this event. Anybody want to say anything before I just simply wish you all a good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you are, and we'll sign off. Is that it? Good. Then with that, then I will close this webinar, and thank you very much for attending. I think there were quite a number of, there was many more panelists than, or participants than I had personally expected. Not all of them, I think, appear in the names in the chat box. I've been trying to check your names and maybe contact some of you, but I think it's difficult. But thank you very much for spending your time with us this afternoon. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a nice
Bye-bye.
afternoon.
Thank you.